Hello! We are, in essence, the quintessential Finnish family, myself, my husband Juha, our cherished children, Emma, who has already turned 12, and our 9-year-old son, Lucas, accompanied by our trusty, albeit aging, Volvo, which over countless shared adventures has traversed nearly every corner of Europe, crisscrossing the continent from end to end. Our home is nestled in a small, tranquil town situated just a stone's throw from Helsinki, where an atmosphere of serenity pervades, perfect order reigns supreme, and the course of events can be readily anticipated. In March and April of 2025, seized by a sudden impulse and inspired by a burgeoning desire to witness something entirely novel, unexplored, and out of the ordinary, we spontaneously resolved to embark on an enthralling road trip across the boundless expanses of Russia. We had heard countless tales of the country's immense size, its rich historical legacy, its vibrant culture, and its time-honored traditions. Moreover, the fact that the border was located so conveniently close to our home made the prospect all the more enticing. Why not seize the opportunity and venture forth? I confess to you with absolute honesty and candor, this impulsive decision proved to be the most colossal blunder we have ever committed. Now, as I sit in the warmth and comfort of my home, a steaming mug of aromatic coffee cradled in my hands, gazing out the window at the immaculately maintained and pristine Finnish streets, I am filled with unwavering conviction and crystal-clear understanding. Never again will I set foot, not even cast a fleeting glance, in the direction of Russia. I intend to recount in meticulous detail precisely how everything transpired in reality, without embellishment or artifice, openly sharing all the feelings and emotions that continue to swirl and churn within me, like a volcano that refuses to cool. Our journey commenced with what initially seemed to be a routine border crossing. Without prolonged deliberation, we opted for the Valima border crossing, the one closest to our location and long established as a popular choice among Finns who regularly journey into Russia in search of cheaper gasoline or advantageous shopping opportunities. Typically, the entire procedure consumes no more than half an hour. A swift presentation of all necessary documents, a cordial smile directed toward the border guard, and you are free to proceed unhindered. However, here we were met with our first, exceedingly unpleasant, and wholly unexpected surprise. An immense queue of automobiles stretched out for an entire kilometer, composed predominantly of antiquated Ladas bearing heavily rusted bodies, and well-worn trucks emitting such an acrid and pungent odor of diesel fuel that our eyes, without exception, began to water uncontrollably. For 4 agonizingly protracted hours, we languished in this seemingly interminable traffic jam. For hours beneath the somber, leaden sky as our poor children whined and fussed in the back seat, while my husband Juha and I desperately attempted to discern what was causing such a significant delay and why everything was progressing at such a snail's pace. The border guards, unfriendly, morose, and as bleak as the autumnal weather itself, scrutinized our documents with meticulous and fastidious attention, posed a barrage of questions in broken, barely intelligible English, and one of them even saw fit to thoroughly inspect the undercarriage of our car with a bright flashlight for reasons that remained obscure. "Welcome to mysterious Russia," Juha murmured almost inaudibly, as we finally managed to inch forward and resume our journey. At that moment, I continued to naively hope and believe that this was merely an unfortunate and isolated incident portending nothing more sinister. St. Petersburg, dazzling grandeur juxtaposed with pervasive decay. The first significant landmark on our itinerary was the magnificent city of St. Petersburg, a city about which we had heard a plethora of enthusiastic and admiring accounts. Indeed, our initial impression proved to be quite favorable, even promising. The broad Nevsky Prospect shone brightly, shimmering with every color of the rainbow. The Hermitage Museum astounded us with its truly immense scale, incredible grandeur, and indescribable beauty, and the majestic St. Isaac's Cathedral, for a fleeting, magical moment, simply compelled us to freeze in place, overcome with complete awe and reverent wonder. We strolled leisurely along the picturesque embankments, enthusiastically photographing the gleaming golden spires, and even ventured to sample the local meat pies, which proved to be quite palatable, even delicious. However, the moment we deviated slightly from the well-trodden tourist routes and turned aside, the entire picture instantaneously and radically transformed into its polar opposite. Shabby and unkempt courtyards, peeling facades of aged buildings, mountains of refuse strewn directly on the streets, and this was supposed to be the cultural capital. On one occasion, we inadvertently wandered into an ordinary residential district in search of the nearest petrol station. Gray and bleak high-rise buildings, as if frozen in some distant, bygone century, rusty and dilapidated playgrounds, where the old swings creaked so eerily and piercingly that they sounded like something out of the most terrifying horror films. My daughter Emma, with evident fear in her voice, asked, "Mom, was there recently a real war here?" Regrettably, I had no idea how to respond to this difficult question. Even in the very heart of the city, where on the surface, everything appeared respectable and prosperous, we could not shake the persistent feeling that behind all the external gloss and ostentatious splendor lurked something deeply melancholic, gloomy, and neglected. Juha astutely observed that the place resembled a beautiful and attractive storefront of an expensive shop, which, regrettably, concealed completely empty shelves. We spent 3 entire days in beautiful St. Petersburg and unanimously decided that it was time for us to move on, placing great hope in the fact that we will manage to see the real Russia in its heartland. Oh, how wrong we were in our expectations and assumptions. Roads to nowhere, an adventure-filled journey through the Russian backcountry. From magnificent St. Petersburg, we promptly set off in the direction of bustling Moscow, but resolved to make a slight detour through the ancient city of Tver and the picturesque city of Yaroslavl, in order to witness firsthand how ordinary people actually lived beyond the confines of the vast, bustling metropolises. The roads weren't a separate account, not even a song, but rather an entire mournful requiem. The asphalt, if one could even liberally describe the surface as such, was riddled with deep potholes and enormous craters, as if it had been subjected to a massive bombardment. Our aging Volvo, long accustomed to the ideal and smooth Finnish roads, groaned and creaked pitifully in every one of its components with each bump and pothole. On one occasion, we became firmly mired in viscous mud on some forgotten dirt road, and we owe a debt of gratitude to a kind local resident in a powerful tractor, who consented to pull us out in exchange for a bottle of vodka, which my husband Juha had prudently taken just in case of an unforeseen event. The landscapes outside the window were also anything but pleasing to the eye and failed to evoke any positive emotions. Gray and dreary fields, sparse and stunted forests, small villages with dilapidated huts, where rusty and battered sheets of metal served as fences. One had the distinct impression that the Soviet Union had never disappeared and continued to exist. In one such village, we stopped near a small shop, a dilapidated structure with a dim sign reading products, where an unfriendly saleswoman with a completely inscrutable expression silently offered us stale bread, sausage of some dubious variety, and several cans of preserves with faded labels, on which it was no longer possible to decipher anything. Emma, accustomed to the vast selection in modern Finnish supermarkets with their bright and colorful shelves, whispered quietly in my ear, "Mom, is that dog food?" I merely sighed heavily in response and said nothing. In the ancient city of Tver, we were met by a dreary and dilapidated train station, dirty and unkempt streets, and a monument to some long-forgotten prince, around which hungry stray dogs roamed leisurely. Yaroslavl proved to be slightly better and more interesting. The local Kremlin made a certain impression on us, but again, the moment we strayed slightly from the central part of the city, the same sad picture presented itself before our eyes: peeling walls of houses, enormous piles of garbage, local residents in old and worn jackets looking at us askance with suspicion and unconcealed mistrust. There was absolutely nothing to see, except for widespread devastation and desolation. The children were already opally bored and constantly complaining, and Juha and I, unfortunately, began to realize that this cheerful and interesting journey was gradually transforming into a real and difficult test for our entire family. Moscow, a long-awaited oasis amidst a boundless desert, Finally, with immense relief, we reached bustling Moscow, and here, I honestly admit, there was indeed something to see and to be sincerely surprised by. Red Square, the majestic Kremlin, the renowned Bolshoi Theater, all of these places, without any doubt, made a tremendous impression and evoked admiration. The city was noisy, vibrant, dynamic, teeming with life and energy. We even decided to go to the famous gum department store, where the prices for ordinary ice cream caused Juha and me to exchange puzzled glances. Who actually buys it at such an exorbitant price? Modern shopping centers sparkled with bright glass and expensive metal, and the cars on the wide roads were exclusively expensive foreign cars of well-known brands. But here, as always, there was an unpleasant fly in the ointment. We strolled with pleasure along the old Arbat, a place that was undoubtedly charming, but the enormous crowds of people, the dirt underfoot, and the importunate beggars at every turn greatly spoiled the overall impression. And then we spontaneously decided to drive to an ordinary outskirts of the city to see the residential areas. The same gray panel buildings, the same rusty garages, the same tired faces of passers-by, as if frozen somewhere in the distant past. Of course, Moscow stands out sharply against the rest of Russia, but even here it is very strongly felt that behind the beautiful facade of ostentatious luxury lies something very uncomfortable, abandoned, and outdated. Our son Lucas, with evident bewilderment in his voice, asked, "Mom, why is everything here so gray and gloomy?" I preferred to remain silent. After all, I simply could not find a suitable answer to his innocent question. Food and daily life, a real trial for the stomach and frayed nerves. The local food deserves a separate detailed description. We have long been accustomed to simple, but always fresh and quality Finnish cuisine. In Russia, everything turned out to be completely different and strange. Cheap cafes along the roads served fatty and rich soups, in which floated pieces of something completely incomprehensible and indefinite, and strange cutlets, which reeked of rancid oil. On one occasion, Juha ordered dumplings for lunch, but they turned out to be so tough and tasteless that he jokingly said they were probably boiled from old car tires. In expensive restaurants in Moscow and St. Petersburg it was slightly better, but the prices were like inexpensive Helsinki, or even significantly higher, while the taste of many dishes left much to be desired. The local hotels also did not please us at all with their quality and comfort. In Tver, we were forced to spend the night in some cheap motel, where the old bed creaked like a cart and rusty water flowed from the tap. In Yaroslavl, we came across a hotel that was slightly cleaner and more decent, but the room smelled unpleasantly of dampness, and the Wi-Fi worked so slowly, as if it was pulled by a small hamster in a wheel. How do people live here in such conditions at all? The children were constantly grumbling and complaining that everything at home was much better, and I completely agreed with them. People and the general atmosphere, much colder than the harsh Finnish winter. The local people are another important reason why this trip left us with such a bitter and unpleasant aftertaste. No, none of them offended us, but we did not feel any warmth, sincere openness, or friendliness at all. In the shops, gloomy sellers looked at us as if we were aliens. In cafes, slow waiters threw plates on the table with such a disgruntled look, as if we owed them something. On one occasion in the village, I politely asked for some clean water for our tired children, and I was silently pointed to an old well across the road. Hospitality? They have clearly never heard of such a concept here. Even in bustling Moscow, where life is in full swing, people seemed somehow tired, alienated, and withdrawn. On the streets, there were mostly gloomy faces. In the metro, there was constant crowding and general tension. Juha very accurately noted that this place is very similar to a huge anthill, where everyone is for himself and no one cares about others. After the usual Finnish silence, tranquility, and general politeness, this greatly affected the frayed nerves. The return journey, a long-awaited escape home. When the long-awaited time finally came to return home, we all, without exception, sighed with immense relief. The return road through Viborg was no different from the previous ones. The same potholes and bumps, the same dreary and monotonous views outside the window. At the border, we were again met by a long queue and gloomy looks of border guards. But when we finally entered the territory of our native Finland, I almost burst into tears of happiness from an excessive feelings. Clean and fresh air, smooth roads, neat and well-maintained houses, as if we had miraculously returned to a completely different, better world. Russia remained far behind, and with it, all our naive illusions and unfulfilled hopes. Once home, Juha and I discussed this difficult trip for a long time. Our children Emma and Lucas unanimously stated that they would never want to return there again. And I understand them perfectly and fully support them. We saw St. Petersburg and Moscow. Yes, there is something beautiful and attractive in these cities. But beyond them there is complete poverty, ruin, and a painful feeling that time has long stopped here in the last century. Never again will I set foot in this country. It is better to travel peacefully through familiar Europe, where everything is clear, convenient, and you do not want to close your eyes from what you see. It was our spontaneous adventure, which we certainly never want to repeat.